Hello, everyone. Wow, you just jumped straight into these. That's fun. I hope everyone's having a great day. I will just share my screen and I'll get started with the presentation, whilst actually introducing myself. But please give me 2 seconds. So hopefully you can see the slides. There we go. So I'll go full screen. I won't be able to see the chat, but I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end if that's possible. But if there are any problems, please someone just holler and I'll solve them. So thanks very much for attending this. Today we're going to be talking about the state of mobile gaming in 2020 and provide insights into a number of key mobile gaming trends and take a close look at the impacts of the global COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns that have had on the mobile games industry, both globally and in Africa. So as a quick intro to start with on who I am and what my company Sensor Tower does. So I'm Craig Chapple. I'm the mobile insight strategist for EMEA at mobile intelligence firm Sensor Tower. I keep an eye on trends in the mobile gaming world and write analysis for our blog on what's going on in the industry using market data from our platform. As well as our blog, I've written articles for publications such as gamesindustry.biz, MCV Develop, and have appeared on the excellent Deconstructor of Fun podcast. Previously, I've worked as the senior editor for mobile games business website pocketgamer.biz, and I also created and ran the Pocket Gamer Mobile Games Awards. Prior to that, I've worked at Nintendo and Develop Magazine, which is now called MCV Develop. As for Sensor Tower, our platform leverages billions of data points to offer unparalleled real-time analysis for millions of apps and thousands of publishers in all major countries and categories, trusted by Fortune 100 companies, top research institutions, major news publications, and leading financial firms. So Sensor Tower serves more than 500,000 mobile apps worldwide, and our tools include, as you can see here, store intelligence, ad intelligence, and usage intelligence. You can find out more by visiting sensortower.com or contacting us directly. I'll have contact details at the end of the presentation. So the first thing we're going to look at in this presentation is the past few years in the mobile gaming space, showing how downloads and user spending has grown over the years and what the most popular categories are. Then later, I'll discuss mobile gaming trends. And then the last part, I'll look at how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted growth, as I said, globally and in Africa. But firstly, it's kind of important to see where we've been so you can see the changes that have occurred. So this chart shows the quarterly growth in the number of game downloads from Q1 2016 to Q4 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see, mobile game downloads have increased each year. So even before the pandemic, which we'll go into later, the market has consistently been on the up. From 2018 to 2019, the number of installs rose 11% year on year to 42.3 billion. India generated the most downloads of any country, accumulating 5.9 billion installs in 2019. The leading category for downloads is the hyper-casual games market. The top 100 hyper-casual games combined for more than 4.7 billion downloads worldwide in 2019. Similar to downloads, global revenue from user spending has reliably risen each year, in fact, growing every half a year, as you can see from this chart. In 2019, user spending hit a record $63 billion, up 17% year on year. The US led the way for user spending last year, with revenue hitting $16.2 billion, up 25% year on year. Japan, meanwhile, ranked second for revenue, while China ranked third. However, it is important to note that we only use estimates from the App Store and Google Play, and not other third-party Android stores. This means that China still ranks third for revenue globally, based just on its App Store spending alone. So we don't count the myriad of third-party Android stores that are available in countries like China. The three biggest games of 2019 were Honor of Kings, PUBG Mobile, known as Game for Peace in China, and that game is in particular doing gangbusters. I think it made $500 million in just over 2 months recently. So that's going from strength to strength. And another of the top games was Fate Grand Order from Sony. All games hail from Asia, and specifically China and Japan. While there are some newcomers to the top grossing global games every now and then, like PUBG Mobile, many of these titles have held these positions for years. One interesting thing to note from this chart is the period of 2018 and early 2019. This chart still shows user spending growth, despite the game's licensing freeze, which occurred in China in 2018, and the slow resumption of approvals in December 2018 and at the start of 2019. During this time, China App Store revenue was actually flat, but the global market still saw a good increase regardless. Taking a look at some global category trends for 2019, we can see that on the App Store, role-playing games dominated spending on iOS. The category is particularly strong in China, with players there contributing 39% of the genre's revenue. In fact, 80% of the category's revenue comes from Asia alone. One thing we've highlighted here that's important is the regional leanings towards particular subcategories, such as casino in the United States, with the country accounting for 63% of casino user spending. And then looking at Google Play, role-playing games make up an even larger share of user spending than on Google Play. Other lucrative categories include strategy and casino, which are more prominent here than on Apple Store. As we've noticed here, the outsized popularity of RPGs across both stores has led publishers to integrate some of their trademark elements into puzzle, simulation, and other titles to aid engagement. Think of titles like Empires and Puzzles, by the Zynga-owned Small Giant Games, for example. So if you haven't played that, definitely check that out. One important thing to note to make sense of the data is that on the App Store, publishers can choose two categories, e.g. strategy and RPG, while on Google Play, publishers choose just one category. And depending on how publishers categorize their apps, that can potentially skew revenue figures, particularly if it's a title you may not typically associate with that genre, such as PUBG Mobile being tagged as a strategy game, for example. So at Sensor Tower, we've actually recently released a game taxonomy to try and get around this. So it's a list that we've created, and we've defined the genres in partnership with Deconstructor of Fun to kind of help make things a bit clearer than they may be currently on the app stores. So next, we're going to look at a few of the big mobile gaming trends in 2020. Firstly, we'll take a look at battle passes and subscriptions. Now, I'm sure this is nothing new to you, as these monetization models are proving to be increasingly popular in mobile gaming, particularly amongst the top-level games. Battle passes, as really popularized by Fortnite, have players spending money each season, which can last any length of time, and rewards players with special content, such as the cosmetic items that you can get in Fortnite. Despite how well the Battle Pass has performed for Fortnite, which is very well, obviously, publishers haven't been able to copy and paste this model at will. But there have been a few key successes. So as you can see from the chart here, one of those is Supercell's Clash of Clans. While it's always made lots of money, user spending had been on the decline since 2015. So this game was released in 2012, dropping to an estimated 572 million in 2018, which most publishers, I'm sure, will be very happy with. But in 2019, however, Supercell was clearly not happy enough, and they introduced the Gold Pass and Season Challenges into the game. This helped spur on a jump in revenue for 2019, driving sales of in-app purchases up 27% year on year to an estimated $722 million. Just to be clear, that's USD. The challenge, of course, will be maintaining this, and it certainly seems to have stemmed the decline ever since for a game that was released, as I said, back in 2012. Another game that has had huge success for the Battle Pass system is PUBG Mobile, with Royale Pass helping the title generate sales, I checked last night, of approximately $3.8 billion from the App Store and Google Play alone. So again, that's not including third-party Android stores. It doesn't always work, though. So Clash Royale, again, a Supercell game, used a Battle Pass system, but that hasn't stopped a revenue decline in that game. It perhaps even encouraged users to spend less money. However, that game has had another recent update with a bunch of new features, and revenue seems to be climbing early on. But I think that's a sign possibly from the Battle Pass. But as well as the Battle Pass, there's also the more traditional subscription model, which asks for users to subscribe for a regular length of time, typically a month. We've seen this used by Nintendo in Animal Crossing, which came later, and in Mario Kart Tour from the start to some success. So Mario Kart Tour has generated an estimated $150 million to date. So we're increasingly seeing passes and subscriptions proven to be viable complements to traditional monetization models across an increasingly wide variety of game genres. But it'll be interesting to see in future just how many more games and genres are able to utilize this successfully. Just as an aside, I think one game I would recommend checking out that uses kind of a number of monetization options from the start, and it uses Battle Pass, is Battle Legion by Chapple. That's a very interesting game. So the second trend we've highlighted is games cutting through the noise with big IP. Utilizing big entertainment IP isn't exactly a new phenomenon, but what is interesting is, in particular, is how classic console IP from the world's biggest publishers is making a big impact on mobile. As you can see here, Mario Kart Tour, which, as I said, has now generated $150 million, accumulated 124 million downloads in its first month. Call of Duty Mobile, which has made even more money, generated 148 million downloads in its first month, while Pokemon Go, back in 2016, generated 163 million. And these aren't hyper-casual titles, of course. These are big titles with IAPs and the long term built in mind. Looking deeper at the all-important revenue, 4 of last year's top 10 grossing games were based on console or PC IP. In the top 30 grossers, 7 of these were based on these big IPs. You could technically say more if you included, perhaps, if you really want to be a bit cheeky, include something like, Gardenscapes or maybe Candy Crush. Technically, they actually started on PC and in the browser, but we didn't include those in our stats there. So we're increasingly seeing big publishers either developing in-house or seeking partnerships to bring their console and PC titles to mobile audiences, in turn creating new business opportunities for them. Just to clarify, for Candy Crush and Gardenscapes, we didn't include them because obviously they're more synonymous with mobile. That's really how they found their popularity. So the next trend we're seeing is that the mobile market is actually growing for everybody. This isn't to downplay the challenges of entering the market, which are significant for those looking to release a top grossing title in particular. But the data is at least promising, as it shows that more money is being shared around. So in 2019, the top 10 grossing games generated $9.7 billion, which was up 5.2% year on year. However, the share of revenue for the top 10 actually decreased from 17.2% in 2018 to 15.8% in 2019. This means that outside of the top 10 grossers, games are getting a bigger slice of the pie. For example, the top 11 to 30 mobile games, in terms of rankings for revenue, generated $8.8 billion last year, which was up 15.9% year on year. So it's a lot of numbers, but they're all written there. So more mobile games makers than ever are realizing a significant success outside of the top 10 for their in-app purchase focused titles. There is a bit of a disclaimer to that trend, however, and that is the rate of consolidation continuing. I could never keep this slide updated enough because it just keeps happening. But the likes of Stillfront, Scopely, Ubisoft, Zynga, AppLovin, and others are making big acquisitions and investments in the market, meaning more studios are becoming interconnected. This comes as the large IP holders, as part of this, are realizing the challenges of breaking into the mobile gaming space and are instead seeking deals with experienced studios to fulfill their ambitions. Sometimes this doesn't include M&A, mergers and acquisitions, but big partnership deals. So think of Nintendo with DNA, and Activision with Tencent for Call of Duty Mobile, and EA with NetEase. So one of the biggest things to happen in the mobile games market, which was going to happen this year but will now be in early 2021, will be changes to the IDFA, or the identifier for advertisers on the Apple App Store. This change was due at the launch of iOS 14, but it's now been delayed until early next year. From then, users will need to opt in to tracking when an app is opened. The net effect of this is that advertisers will have much less visibility on mobile users, as it's expected that many users will simply just not opt in. Adjust claims that 20% of iOS users already cannot be tracked through the IFA because they have limit ad tracking turned on. And this latest update will make it even more challenging for publishers. This is a move that will affect everyone, from publishers that focus on games with in-app purchases, who will have new challenges targeting users, to hyper-casual publishers who acquire en masse and whose entire business model really relies on bringing millions of players through user acquisition. I won't be going too deep into this topic, but I advise you to check out user acquisition expert Eric Seufert's thoughts on IDFA over on Mobile Dev Memo. He's constantly talking about it, and that's where I cheekily stole this image of Avengers from one of his articles on the subject. Lastly, on our trends, before I get to the COVID-19 impact, is China's App Store licensing crackdown. So for a quick bit of history, it's actually been part of the regulations in China for a while now that mobile games on its stores need to be approved and obtain an ISBN to be released in the country. This ensures that these titles adhere to the country's strict regulations and content requirements. While Android stores have adhered to this, the App Store has actually acted as an open grey market of sorts, with publishers able to release titles without an ISBN on the store. This is no longer the case moving forward, however. What's more, publishers that have already have games on the App Store had until July 31st of this year to provide one, or their game would be removed. I should note that for now, this only affects premium games and those with in-app purchases. So free games that monetize solely through ads are unaffected by this measure. As a result of the crackdown, in the first 7 days of July, even before the official ban came in, more than 2,500 mobile games were removed from the App Store. In August, more than 27,400 games were removed from the App Store. As you can see in this chart, the daily median number of games removed from China's App Store jumped by 137% to 277 in August, which was up from 117 in July. Please note, however, that our figures only capture titles that were large enough to rank in the App Store's game subcategories at some point, and that have been removed for 5 days or more. So you may see some larger numbers elsewhere. Ultimately, what this means is this crackdown makes it yet more challenging for international companies to release their games in China. It's worth noting that it will also be challenging for ad-focused games to be successful in China following this crackdown. According to My Games, in an article on PocketGamer.biz, titles that don't have an ISBN will not be able to run social ads on channels owned by Tencent and ByteDance, limiting the user acquisition capabilities of publishers who try to avoid licensing requirements. So next, we're going to look at how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the mobile games market. As I said, both globally, and then we'll look at Africa. First up is we'll look at global downloads. So as you can see from this chart, which expands on the chart at the start of this presentation, there was a very notable increase in mobile game installs in Q1 2020 and Q2 2020. So where you may often see rises at certain times of the year, these spikes were just huge. So in Q1, downloads shot up by 21% quarter over quarter and 39% year over year to 13.4 billion. In Q2 2020, meanwhile, downloads grew further, rising by 12.2% quarter over quarter and 44.4% year over year. Downloads finally peaked in April 2020 at some 5.5 billion for the month, which really coincided with the peak of the global pandemic and lockdowns, which would begin easing in various countries over the following months. But now some countries, such as the UK, unfortunately, are kind of implementing restrictions and lockdowns in certain cities. The games that were able to benefit most during kind of lockdown and stay-at-home orders were those that help connect consumers remotely, including Words with Friends 2, Scrabble Go, which launched this year, I believe, Roblox and Fortnite, just to name just a few. Though, of course, with Words with Friends 2 and Scrabble Go, these games were competing, so you would expect to see competition in downloads following the launch of the latter by Scopely. And next, we can look at revenue and see how it follows on from downloads. So revenue had a smaller increase in Q1 2020 than downloads, rising 6.6% quarter over quarter and 16% year over year to $17.5 billion. So still a lot of money. This was because revenue seemed to lag behind downloads, and what we saw was a significant rise in Q2, which you can see is larger than in previous years. In Q2 2020, revenue was up 10.7% quarter over quarter and 28% year over year to $19.4 billion. Revenue peaked in May at $6.6 billion, 1 month after downloads peaked in April. It's currently unclear whether a rise in user spending can be maintained into 2021. Currently, that does seem to be the case, but it will still depend on factors including economic outlook and whether new consumer habits will stick. Excuse me. So in this slide, you can see estimates for mobile games downloads in Africa from 2016 through to the end of Q2 2020. The countries included in this data set are Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Madagascar, Nigeria, South Africa, and Tunisia, so 9 countries. As you can see, Africa followed similar trends to the rest of the world. People are spending more of their time playing games on their smart devices. Downloads in Q1 2020 grew by 33.7% quarter over quarter to 484 million. Installs then rose again by a further 35.7% quarter over quarter to 657 million in Q2 2020, smashing records for the region. And like I say, as you can see from this chart, it's the spike is quite incredible. Looking at player spending, we can see that once again, Africa is in line with global trends amid the global pandemic and lockdowns. So revenue in Q1 2020 actually rose by a modest 2.9% quarter over quarter to $36 million. In Q2 2020, meanwhile, player spending increased by 16.7% quarter over quarter to $42 million, which is a sharper increase than from Q4 to Q1. In the first half of the year, player spending in Africa peaked in May at $14.5 million. So going back to, now we'll kind of look at the United States just to get kind of a look at genre trends and be a bit more specific about which categories saw the biggest boost during lockdown. So in the US, downloads spiked in March 2020 amid shelter-in-place orders, resulting in an increase in installs across the top genres, including hyper-casual, puzzle, simulation, and lifestyle. By June, downloads for hyper-casual, puzzle, and arcade games had fallen below their respective totals in January. Simulation and lifestyle games, meanwhile, were able to maintain most of the increase from earlier in the year. Overall, game category downloads in the US fell below January levels by June, but were above February at 445.7 million. We expect the baseline for game downloads to be above pre-COVID-19 levels moving forward. What makes that actually quite interesting is, in particular for hyper-casual or games that make money through ads, is that even if user spending kind of went down, there is potential for increased ad revenue. That again, that'll depend on many factors moving forward. Revenue in the US mobile games market peaked a couple months after the increase in downloads. The top 200 games combined for nearly $1.5 billion in US user spending in May, though revenue decreased across the top genres in June. Similar to downloads, revenue growth was also distributed across the top genres and was especially high for simulation and shooter games, which each saw quarter-on-quarter growth of nearly 50% in Q2 2020. Overall, revenue peaked in May 2020 at $1.9 billion, lagging behind downloads and coinciding with states across the country easing lockdown measures. The top 5 grossing games during Q2 2020 in the US were Roblox, Candy Crush Saga, Coin Master, Fortnite, and Gardenscapes. So I may have alluded to some of our forecasts in the previous slides, but you can see some specifics in our predictions through to 2024. Downloads are expected to increase by 35.7% year over year in 2020 to 57 billion as a result of the global pandemic and lockdowns, which is a significant jump from 2019, as you can see from this chart. Over the next few years, mobile games are forecast for higher growth than apps in terms of downloads. The COVID-19 boost to mobile game downloads is likely to be persistent, as I was saying, leading to an increase in downloads from our previous forecast that we had for the years ahead, as consumers, again, turn to their phones more than ever. 2020 will see the largest revenue jump over the next few years, rising by 14.3% year over year to $72 billion. App Store game revenue is projected to grow 51% by 2024, or a CAGR of 8.5%, while the Google Play Games category will have a CAGR of 10.2% between 2019 and 2024. So to sum up the key takeaways from this presentation, as I've just mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly had a significant impact on both downloads and revenue, at least in the short term. In the long term, we expect downloads to continue to surge, which is why we've raised our forecast through to 2024. Other key takeaways are that the mobile games market is growing for everybody, not just the top games. Mergers and acquisitions will continue to ramp up in a mature mobile games market. We even recently had an IPO from Unity. Further enforcements of regulations in China will make it more challenging for international publishers to enter the market, but it won't make it impossible. The App Store's IDFA changes, which will now happen next year, but they will still impact how many publishers conduct their user acquisition campaigns. But despite all the challenges around the world and that the mobile games market faces, the sector continues to thrive Africa and on the global stage. So thanks for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions at all about what I've discussed today or would just like to reach out, you can ask me in a moment, or you can email me at craig.chapple@sensortower.com. If you're interested in finding out more about the platform and how it could help business and give you a competitive advantage, you can reach out to our expert team by emailing sales@sensortower.com, who can guide you through the platform and services that we offer. And once again, you can visit sensortower.com. You can read our analysis on the blog that we publish each week, and you can just take a look at the platform for yourself. I hope you enjoyed this presentation today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, and have a great day.